The preview for Total War Pharaoh's Tausret is out, and I have some thoughts. This is going to be a little more freeform than normal. I literally just came out a couple hours ago, and these are what I think. Some of it's good, some of it looks not so good. But we're going to work through it here and notice some of what we see. I'm not going to show you the whole preview here. You can go to the Total War YouTube page, link in the description. Take a look at that. I'm just going to mostly show you and focus on the clips that I noticed. So right away, there's that little cinematic trailer. It looks very nice. Obviously, art is nice, music is nice. The character models are a little bit inconsistent. Tausret looks terrible, but not from an artistic point of view. Just, I think she may have just actually dressed like that. This does seem to be consistent with some images of New Kingdom fashion. They just had really bad fashion back then, which I can't blame anybody but the fashion people. Anyway, her moniker is the Strategist, which is an interesting way to approach Tausret as a character, and her little speech at the beginning. We obviously don't know much about Tausret's character. We have very little data on her at all, but the Strategist isn't terrible. It's better than Ramesses being the paragon, whatever that's supposed to mean, and Amenmessa being the gilded one. I mean, maybe he's rich, but is there really nothing else you can get at with him? I liked my title of the brooding rebel. It seems more consistent. Anyway, she's the Strategist. That's good. We'll give her points for that. But the first thing I really want to zero in on is we get a good look at Lower Egypt's campaign map. And so right in the middle, you see there's Merneptah. And they did say he's dead at this point. The Civil War has already begun. We're going to look at that in a little bit. But, he's right at the capital around Memphis. That's a good place for Merneptah. And, of course, Seti is right next to him in the core region. That makes sense. That's pretty good. Of course, over in Sinai, we see Ramesses. We've already seen in the Ramesses trailer that this is where he starts. We discussed it in the Ramesses video. We don't know where he's supposed to be, but Sinai's about as good a place as any. But what I want to draw your attention to is look over here in the west. There is Setnacht. Now, this is Ramesses' father, and he's a completely different color, telling us that they're two completely different factions. And I was complaining in the Ramesses video, where's his father? I was complaining in the Setnacht video, where's Setnacht? This guy's a major player. And now we know where he is. He's on the other side of Egypt from his son, even though his son is like 13 or 15 years old. Not sure exactly what turn they're on at this map, but his son is like 13 years old. He's not an independent faction leader. Ramesses and Setnacht should be in the exact same place. They should be part of a family. But of course they haven't implemented families, so they can't be part of a family. Anyway, we go down the Nile a little bit. Things look pretty fine, more or less, like the towns are in the right place. I do like you can see right north of Tausret there is Waset, which is Thebes, of course, and they do mention Waset is Thebes, and I like that they've made the deliberate choice to use the native Egyptian names for these towns rather than the later foreign, often Greek names for these towns. And it really shows that somebody cares. Somebody knows their stuff and thought about this, but then somebody else on the team put Setnacht and Ramesses on opposite sides of the map. I don't understand it. I really don't. Anyway, We know also that down in the south of Tausret, and this is a fine place for Tausret, right in the Egyptian heartland, right near Thebes. Makes sense. We don't have any real idea where she would have been, but putting her here is good. And then, of course, we know that Amun-Messa is down further south from there, which we do know he was probably governor of Nubia. Then we do get this little clip. We see Pharaoh Merneptah dead in his little funeral procession. This is a really good scene. It looks like a 3D version of some inscribed image out of a funerary text somewhere carved into a wall. It's somebody cares. That's my point. But then, at the same time, we've seen in this showcase that Merneptah, even though he's dead, he still shows up on lists and menus. He shows up in diplomacy with his face there even. So it's not just Merneptah's faction that's still there, which is what the announcer says. It's Merneptah's faction. But why does Merneptah's faction exist now that Merneptah's dead? It's pretty clear that his chosen successor was Seti II. Now, it's fine that there are plenty of competitors, and it's actually, I'm quite happy with the idea that they've introduced a whole bunch of new potential competitors, the idea that just anybody in Egypt could have ended up winning, at least any of the major players in Egypt could have ended up winning. This is consistent with what we read about in the Harris Papyrus, which is the 20th dynasty's view of this period. It's just so weird that Merneptah is still there. There wouldn't have been anybody fighting to defend Merneptah. 100% of the people who had been Merneptah partisans while he was alive would either be backing his chosen heir or would be backing someone else. There's no residual here. I don't understand it. Anyway, it is Tausret's video, but I do want to zoom in on this right here. The kingdom of Hatti has slept too long, broken and fractured by infighting. And that makes me very worried for what's going on up north. We haven't seen a lot up north, and that's kind of okay for a marketing standpoint. I can see they're focusing on Egypt right now. Don't get distracted with the whole map. Focus on the Egypt narrative. But what is the Hittite narrative going to look like? Now, we're going to have Hittite episodes coming up soon. They've been written, they've been recorded, they haven't been edited. The whole doing these videos takes a lot for me. I'm a podcast guy. I'm not used to all this video stuff. But the kingdom of Hatti never slept. Certainly not in the New Kingdom period, which is the last 200 years. It's constantly at war with somebody. And so this perception that it's been sleeping for too long, no. They're having major conflicts. And there is a place for certain other people to step in and potentially take the Hittite throne. I won't get too distracted with that. I'm just going to say I don't like it. The description for the Pharaoh, that's pretty good. That's solid. So they get some points for that. But then we come back over here and we look at all of the legitimacy stuff. Here again, Merneptah is at the top of the list of pretenders. I don't really understand. Now there is sort of like a knife icon. Maybe that means he's dead, and once the timer runs out, he's not a valid candidate. I don't know why his faction still exists. Seti should be inheriting most of this faction. That's really the start and end of it. But the rest of it, the rest of the pretenders list, the rest of the whole legitimacy system, I actually do like it. I really do kind of like it. Now, it's obviously a simplification and a gamification of what historically would have been an incredibly complicated process of diplomacy, getting various important people on your side, and of course, having the best armies. This simplifies it all to having the most land and or the most developed land. As far as we can tell, building these monument structures and owning certain towns, that's your path to legitimacy as far as we know. It's a fine approximation for what would have been an incredibly complicated actual historical event. You don't want to do the actual complicated thing, you want to do the simpler thing. It's a video game. Ultimately, the point is to fight my guys against your guys. So that's okay. But then, take a listen to this clip right here.
Once we take the lead for legitimacy, we'll claim our place as Pharaoh, and using that power, take Menepher, our rightful land to rule from, also known as Memphis.
So this is a mixed bag here, and the whole game, I could shorten this whole reaction video to, it's a mixed bag. Menepher is Memphis, and the fact that they're using the proper Egyptian name, again, that's great. The fact that he's pointing out, oh yeah, this is the city you know as Memphis. That's good, especially if it's in game somewhere so that people can learn that the more common names are not the native names. But then he calls it Menepher, like it rhymes with Jennifer. No, it's Menepher. It's Menepher. It's pronounced very differently. And this guy's not the voice actor. I don't know who this guy is doing the voiceovers. He seems like a nice guy. He's probably some developer, just some guy in the studio putting these videos together because they said, hey, come put this video together for us. I assume that they're going to have an actual voice actor pronouncing these things, but this is a small thing that suggests to me that he doesn't know. Now, if you have a regular guy on the street looking at the words Menepher and he pronounces it wrong because he's reading off the script, that's fine. I don't blame him. It's fine. But this guy's making this game. This guy's somehow involved in making and marketing this game to the world, and he doesn't care how to pronounce it correctly, or he doesn't know how to pronounce it correctly. He should know these things. These very small details that show that there's a mix in this studio between people who know what they're talking about and people who are just there for the gameplay side. Which is fine to be there for the gameplay side. You could put a little bit of time into basic historical details, just like the art guys have done, just like the unit guys have done. Look at these. Here are these Libyan native units. You got a Libyan slinger, you got a Libyan tribesman. Looks like that's either a spear or it's just a club with a rock on it. And that's great. That's realistic. Guy with a club with a rock on it, that's fine. Anyway, the next thing we see in our preview video is the list of local gods. The first thing I noticed was that you have to discover all the Egyptian gods. That seems strange to me. The fact is, Tausret would have known every god on this list from childhood. This is just part of the culture. You don't discover Anubis. You don't discover Ra. You already know who Ra is. You know his rituals. You know a lot of stuff. Now, I could see having to discover the Hittite gods if you're an Egyptian. You might have heard of them, but you don't know necessarily these Hittite gods unless you've had some sort of experience. But it is, again, a gameplay element. It's a way to make towns more strategic. I don't like that they're calling it discovered. You could say made available. because you can't. The idea here is you can't worship a god properly unless you have one of their cult centers, I think, or one of the towns that worships them. Then you can start worshiping these gods. That makes sense. And they do call them local deities, which I like a lot. In fact, the entire rest of what I see in the religion section here is pretty great. All of the art for these gods could have come right out of a tomb, right out of a temple. The gods look great. These, of course, are all real gods. In the other clips we've seen from other previews, they've got the Canaanite gods right. They've got the Hittite gods right. I may well go through and make a lore video on all the different religions and gods here. They seem like they're doing a good job here, is what I'm saying. Now, some internet people, I've seen them complaining. They're all, I don't want no magic in my historical game. And they're mad because if you worship a different god, it gives you different effects. But I actually really like this. Now, I don't believe that worshipping Osiris is actually going to give you a bonus to chariots or whatever in some sort of supernatural magical way, but it accords with how ancient people saw their religion. Nowadays, someone's either a Christian or a Muslim or whatever because they think that this is a truth claim about the world. If I believed that Muhammad was the one and only true prophet, I would just naturally be a Muslim because that's the truth claim of the world I believe. But here, everyone just instinctively already agrees that there are a whole bunch of gods. The Hittites have 1,000 gods. The Egyptians have a whole bunch. Who even knows how many? People have trouble counting all the little gods. And there's this set of major gods. Everyone already believes these things. They worship the gods because they want benefits and they want to avoid being cursed by the gods. And all throughout the Near East, you pick certain gods out of the set to be your primary personal deities because you think you can have a relationship with these gods and, critically, that you can get benefits from these gods. And so I think that part's good. I do think that part's good. Looking at another thing people on the internet have been complaining about, look at these guys walking around in nice, neat, orderly rows. Of course, some of them, they're not in neat, orderly rows, but you hear people complaining. Why are these guys all lined up in neat, orderly rows? As if lining up had been invented by the Romans or something, which is absolute nonsense. You get clips of people in blobs. You also get clips of people lined up properly, and they look like, let's be honest, this is the same engine as every other Total War game. That's the real reason why sometimes they're in blobs and sometimes they're in nice, neat, orderly rows. But these guys knew how to line up. They weren't dumb. They weren't completely lacking in discipline. These are kind of state armies. Getting into all that is a lot, but, well, anyway, skipping forward a bit, we get another interesting audio clip.
Plus our closest crown rival, Amen-Mes.
So the exact pronunciation of this guy's name is open to a little bit of flexibility because we do see it in a couple different ways. But I've been going Amen-Mesa because that's sort of an easy approximation for an English speaker. Amen-Mesis is a little bit more correct. This is a name in the same form as who we call Ramesses. Rameses. Ra, in Ramesses' name, is the god Ra. Mesa means begotten of. So Rameses is the begotten of Ra, the child of Ra. Amen-Meses is the child of Amun. Amen-Mes is just sloppy. And again, why does this guy not know how to pronounce the characters in the game he's making? I don't like it. I don't like it. I'll show you something else I don't like. This clip right here. Tausret has now won in the game that they're showing off. That part's fine. Tausret really was the Queen of Egypt, King of Egypt, leader of Egypt for a decent amount of time. But she's won too early, can I say. They don't bring up the issue of her marriage to Seti, except in this clip right here.
The sun sets over Egypt, and I've noticed that Seti is edging closer and closer to the idea of confederation. As my husband, I thought he would have suggested that a little bit sooner, but I guess he was busy. Let's give him a little ultimatum and see where his loyalties lie. Yeah, I thought.
And even here, you can hear it's almost played as a joke. Like maybe the guy doing the announcements doesn't really understand what's going on here. Tausret can't be Pharaoh and be married to a living Seti. She can't be Pharaoh and be regent over Siptah, who I haven't seen Siptah anywhere, which I don't know if he really belongs because he wasn't really faction leader at any real point. And maybe that's how we should be reading this, that Tausret, in being Pharaoh, that's just a simplification of her being regent over Siptah. But she shouldn't be presented as ruling in her own right while there's still a man around her to be the ruler. Now, people on the internet, they've already been complaining that she is strong female character or that she's token woman or something. That's utter nonsense. I could totally believe that Creative Assembly would put a token female character in if one wasn't available, but Tausret is a major mover and shaker in this period. She absolutely belongs in a game about the fall of the 19th dynasty. But it should also be recognized that Egypt was not a feminist society. If she's actually married to Seti, then Seti is Pharaoh when she wins, because kingship is inherently male in Egyptian society. But of course, right after this, she's confederating with Seti. It's not clear if she's married or not. There is no apparent handling of what was a major factor in her life at all. I don't like it. Well, I like a lot of it. I like a lot of the little details. The music's great. A lot of the little visual details. Look at this chariot. Look at this really attractive chariot. I have nothing to criticize about it here. Maybe I'm missing something here, but here we have the Queen of Egypt fighting in a battle in the way that she's presented as fighting in ancient historical art. It's great. This part is great. The battles look plausible. They look fairly realistic overall. The units, I haven't gotten too deep into the units yet, but they look all right, which I was a little bit surprised about. I was thinking to really have to fight every single unit in the lineup, but this is not bad. Of course, there's gamification, there's simplification, but what I don't like is this, that some of the game seems like they really care about the setting, and some parts of the team give off these little hints. Some parts of the game give off these hints that they don't care about the setting, that they could make a Total War game in any violent historical period. And those genericisms, those parts of the game that are generic or ignoring the full context, that's going to drag the game down. Those parts that really lean into and build up the fall of the 19th dynasty, it's a really, if you've been listening to my lore series, it's a really compelling historical era. And I hope they do better. I really hope that maybe some of this stuff is still getting ironed out. Maybe, like the Merneptah stuff, maybe that's a placeholder they're still working on. The game comes out in October. Right now, it's the end of June. It's not a lot of time for major changes, but who knows? Who knows? Ultimately, we'll see. I remain, as I have been for a while, cautiously optimistic. I still don't have much to say about the business practices. The gameplay is looking pretty good. Hopefully, the QA is done well up to standard, better than like Rome 2 was. But we'll see. I think the potential is here for a really fantastic portrayal of the Bronze Age collapse. I also think the potential is here for this to be pretty generic and pretty dull. And so I'm just going to keep making lore videos so that you know how amazing this period could be, and when the game comes out, we'll all see together if it lives up to that or not. I really have the highest hopes. As a fan of the Total War franchise back since Rome 1, I still have some of those songs from the Rome 1 loading screens and stuff, and the campaign map screens. They're still in my head, because that was a fantastic game. The Warhammer series came out amazingly. I loved Three Kingdoms. But then also, I know that they can fall short. And as a history podcaster focusing on the Bronze Age, I really, really don't want them to fall short in my time period. Anyway, that's all my thoughts on this video. Make sure you like and subscribe. Leave your comments down in the comments below. Let me know what you think about this video. Let me know what you'd like to hear about in upcoming videos. Until then, thank you for watching.